I had crossed the threshold of 28, and while many women my age were settling down into married life, I remained unmoved by the idea. Not because no one asked, but because I said no again and again. Suitors came with polished smiles and respectable professions, but none of them felt right. Each time a proposal arrived, I found reasons to reject it. Too quiet, too loud, too traditional, too modern. Somehow, none of them matched the blueprint I had built in my mind for a life partner. And so, I stayed unmarried. Those around me started whispering. My parents, though patient, had begun to worry. They never pressured me outright, but their eyes often carried the weight of silent concern. My father would sometimes sit next to me in the evening, trying to soften my heart with gentle words. Good proposals don't come every day, he'd say with an affectionate smile, and they rarely wait forever. But I couldn't help it. I believed I deserved something extraordinary, someone who understood my independence, respected my career, and matched my energy. I was a working woman, confident in my choices, and far too aware of what I did not want. That awareness, however, had slowly isolated me. As months turned into years, the tension at home deepened. My rejections, once met with understanding, now triggered quiet arguments and lingering silences. My father's once hopeful expressions began to fade. "You've let so many good matches go," he said one night, "and I'm afraid if your mother and I are no longer here, who will look after you?" His words stung. Instead of comfort, they sparked defiance. "So you'd rather marry me off to just anyone?" I snapped. "Maybe you'd tie me to the first stranger walking down the street if it meant I was out of your hands." He said nothing after that, but I saw something in his eyes I hadn't noticed before, tears. Real ones. And guilt washed over me briefly, yet I couldn't let go of my standards. I believed that settling would cost me more than waiting. Eventually, they stopped bringing it up. No more introductions, no more gentle encouragement. Silence had taken the place of concern. I turned 30 without any fuss, no birthday cakes, no family dinners, just a quiet acknowledgement of another year gone. That's when he arrived. A new department head joined our company in early August. His name was Shah Nawaz. Everyone called him Sir Nawaz. He was strikingly handsome, the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to be respected. He spoke little but worked hard, and within days he had the entire office in order. The women whispered about him constantly, some with dreamy eyes, others with flirtatious intentions. But he never looked twice at anyone, and that caught my attention. There was something undeniably magnetic about Shah Nawaz. He carried himself with quiet authority, a presence that demanded respect without ever asking for it. Unlike most men in the office, he didn't indulge in small talk or office gossip. He focused solely on his work, kept his interactions minimal, and remained strangely detached from all the admiration he received. While others laughed over tea breaks or exchanged lighthearted banter, Shah Nawaz would be reviewing files or responding to emails with unwavering concentration. At first, I dismissed him as just another serious man with no time for the world, but over time, I noticed how effortlessly he led, how calmly he handled pressure, and how respectfully he spoke to everyone, from the senior manager to the janitor. I had met enough men who wore charm like a mask, but Shah Nawaz had none of that. His honesty was in his stillness, and ironically, it was that restraint that stirred something inside me. Then one rainy evening, fate decided to blur the boundaries we had both unknowingly set. I had stayed back at work to finish a report, and by the time I reached the parking lot, the office van had already left. The sky was overcast, the streets were quiet, and my phone battery had died. I stood there, slightly panicked, wondering if I should call a cab from the nearby shop when headlights flashed in my direction. It was Shah Nawaz. He slowed down and rolled down his window. "Why are you still here?" he asked, his tone calm but genuinely curious. "I missed the van," I replied, trying to hide the discomfort in my voice. "And I don't really have a backup plan." He was silent for a second, then reached over and pushed open the passenger door. "Come on, I'll drop you home. This weather's not safe to be out in." I hesitated. Sitting alone in a car with a man, even one I respected, wasn't something I did lightly, but the sky growled and a cold wind slapped across my face as if nature itself was urging me to decide. Reluctantly, I stepped in. As we drove, he asked me where I lived, and the silence that followed was surprisingly comfortable. He wasn't trying to impress me, wasn't asking personal questions, just driving steadily with the occasional glance toward the road ahead. But then, as the ride went on, he spoke, softly, carefully. About his job, about the responsibility of leadership, about the pressure of making people happy without losing yourself in the process. In those short minutes, something shifted. I saw not just the man who led with quiet strength, but someone deeply human, someone who had lived through things he hadn't yet said. By the time we reached my house, the tension had faded. Before I could thank him and step out, I heard myself say something I hadn't planned. "Would you like to come in for a cup of tea?" He paused for a moment, then nodded with a faint smile. "Sure, just for a few minutes." I led him inside, slightly nervous. My parents, surprised to see a man with me, stood up from the sofa, but Shah Nawaz's demeanor instantly dissolved the awkwardness. He greeted them with warmth and humility. No arrogance, no formality too heavy to bear. His calm presence filled the room like a gentle breeze, and within moments, it felt as though we had known him much longer than a 20-minute car ride. My father asked him about his work, and Shah Nawaz responded respectfully, speaking in measured tones that carried both clarity and conviction. My mother poured him tea while stealing subtle glances at me, a smile tugging at her lips. And though I avoided her eyes, I could feel the weight of unspoken thoughts hovering in the room. Before he left, he thanked my parents sincerely and turned to me with a soft nod. His eyes held something unreadable, gentle but firm, distant yet aware. For a moment, I forgot how to speak. As he stepped out, I closed the door slowly behind him, my heartbeat still echoing in my ears. 10 days passed quietly, though my thoughts were anything but. I told myself not to read into that evening, but deep inside, a strange anticipation grew. I started noticing myself dressing a little better for work, checking the clock more often, listening for footsteps that never arrived. He, meanwhile, remained as composed as ever, neither closer nor colder. The balance between us stayed untouched, and I both admired and resented it. Then on a quiet Sunday morning, he appeared at our door again. This time, he wasn't alone. Standing beside him was a young girl, no older than 15, with bright eyes and an air of polished confidence. She wore expensive clothes and held her purse like it belonged in a fashion magazine. I invited them in, trying to conceal the whirlwind stirring inside me. My parents joined us in the drawing room. There were polite smiles, casual questions, a few shared laughs. But beneath it all, I sensed something more. Shah Nawaz was leading this visit somewhere, and when he finally cleared his throat and looked my father directly in the eye, I knew what was coming. "I've come to formally ask for Faiza's hand in marriage," he said. The room fell silent. I stared at him in disbelief, unable to process the words. It was like standing in the center of a dream, one I never dared to imagine. My father didn't reply immediately. Instead, he nodded politely and said, "We'll think about it." The conversation drifted to other topics, but my mind had frozen. Was this real? Was this the man I had once admired from a distance, now standing here, offering to tie his life with mine? And yet, as soon as they left, I saw something shift in my father's eyes. Something that would cast a long shadow over my joy. I could barely sit still after they left. My thoughts ran wild, dancing between disbelief and anticipation. The man I had admired in silence had just asked for my hand in marriage, openly, respectfully, and without any dramatic gestures. It was everything I had always wanted, a proposal that came with dignity and sincerity. I turned to my parents, my heart racing, but their expressions did not match my excitement. My father stood quietly, his face unreadable, and walked into the other room without a word. My mother looked at me, her brows furrowed with uncertainty. "He seems like a good man," she said gently. "But your father is hesitant." Hesitant? That word clung to my skin like cold mist. I followed my father and found him sitting by the window, lost in thought. I didn't wait. "What is it?" I asked, unable to mask my frustration. "Didn't you see how respectfully he spoke? How decent and sincere he was?" He turned his head slowly and looked at me with tired eyes. "It's not about manners, Faiza," he said. "It's about what we don't know. He has no parents, no elders in the house, no one to guide him or hold him accountable if things ever go wrong. All he has is that one young sister." I stood frozen for a moment, then shook my head. "That's your reason?" I asked, half laughing. "You're worried because he doesn't come with an army of relatives? Isn't that what people usually prefer? A small family? Fewer complications? He didn't reply. Instead, he lowered his eyes and said, "We don't know his background. No roots, no elders, no story. You met him only weeks ago. What if something isn't as it seems?" I felt anger rise in my chest. "You always wanted me to get married, didn't you? You constantly said time was running out. Now that someone worthy has come forward, suddenly you want to investigate his family tree?" He didn't raise his voice. "I only want to protect you." But I was no longer in the mood for protection. I was a working woman, self-sufficient and strong. I had found someone on my terms, someone who respected me. And now, my own father was standing in the way. "I'm not a little girl," I said firmly. "This is my decision, and I will marry Shah Nawaz." He didn't say another word. That night, I lay awake, torn between defiance and doubt. Somewhere in my heart, I still longed for his blessing. But I had also tasted the sting of silence, the silence that comes when your dreams don't match those of the people you love. In the end, my will prevailed. The proposal was accepted. Shah Nawaz and I were to be married in a simple ceremony. No grand celebrations, no unnecessary delays, just a quiet union, as he had requested. But what I didn't know then, what none of us knew, was that this story was not going to unfold like the fairy tales I had grown up believing in. The wedding happened just as planned, quietly, simply, without much fanfare. A few close relatives, some colleagues, and a soft breeze of curiosity surrounded us. People whispered about how lucky I was to have caught the attention of a man like Shah Nawaz. Even at work, the news created a wave of surprised admiration. No one could believe that the ever-serious department head had chosen someone from among them. And yet, there I was, his bride. He asked me to leave my job, gently but firmly. "You don't need to work anymore," he said. "Let me take care of everything." I agreed without protest. I had always wanted to settle down with someone who respected me, and if this was his way of offering security, I was ready to accept it. But nothing could have prepared me for our wedding night. When I entered the bedroom, still in my bridal dress, heart fluttering with nervous excitement, I saw something that made me pause. Shah Nawaz wasn't alone. Beside him stood Mala, his younger sister, the same girl who had accompanied him when he brought the proposal. She was dressed casually, her expressions calm, almost unaffected by the occasion. Before I could make sense of her presence, Shah Nawaz said, "Mala will be sleeping with us tonight." I stared at him, stunned. "What do you mean, with us?" "She's always slept in my room," he replied casually. "She gets anxious sleeping alone. Since our parents passed away, she's clung to this routine. It helps her feel safe." I looked at Mala. She didn't look afraid. She looked comfortable. Too comfortable. And she certainly didn't look like a fragile little girl. Her makeup was flawless, her confidence unshaken. I felt a tightness in my chest. This was supposed to be our night, mine and Shah Nawaz's. A beginning, a moment meant for closeness. Instead, he calmly laid out her bedding next to mine and took a blanket to the couch, saying he didn't want either of us to feel awkward. I said nothing, not because I agreed, but because I didn't know how to protest. I was still in my wedding dress, still trying to grasp that I was now someone's wife. I didn't want to argue on the very first night, so I remained silent, even as Mala climbed into my bed like it was her own. The hours that followed were long and sleepless. I stared at the ceiling while Shah Nawaz slept soundly on the sofa, and Mala turned her back to me without a word. I had entered this home as a bride, but felt more like an intruder in someone else's life. When dawn broke, so did my illusions. The beginning I had dreamed of had already been rewritten, not by time or fate, but by the presence of a girl who, though smiling sweetly, had already claimed a space that should have belonged to me. The morning after my wedding, I woke up to find Shah Nawaz already gone for work. Mala was still sleeping beside me, unbothered, almost as if nothing unusual had happened. I quietly got out of bed and walked to the kitchen, unsure of what I was supposed to do. I was in a new home, in a role I had long imagined would feel empowering, wife, partner, homemaker, but all I felt was displaced. A few minutes later, Mala walked in, casually tying her hair and yawning. She didn't greet me, didn't offer a smile, not even a hint of recognition that I was now her brother's wife. Instead, she said bluntly, "Faiza, can you make me breakfast?" Her tone wasn't requesting, it was commanding. I was nearly a decade older than her, yet she spoke to me like I was the help. I held back my reaction, reminding myself this was just the beginning. I made her a simple breakfast, fried eggs and parathas, and set it on the table with quiet hope that perhaps food would soften things. But as soon as she saw the plate, her expression changed. "This is disgusting," she snapped, pushing the plate away. "You don't even know how to make an omelet? What exactly did my brother see in you?" The words cut deep. For a second, I felt something inside me flinch. I looked at her, stunned, and said carefully, "If you didn't like it, you could have made your own." That's all it took. She exploded. What started as a small complaint turned into a full-blown tantrum. She accused me of being rude, selfish, even lazy. She shouted that I was trying to take her brother away from her, that I'd ruined the peace of their home. Her words weren't just harsh, they were laced with something far darker. Jealousy? Possessiveness? I couldn't tell. The rest of the day passed in tension. She moved around the house like she owned it, slamming doors, muttering insults under her breath, and ignoring me altogether. I tried to brush it off, hoping things would calm down when Shah Nawaz returned. But when he finally did, what happened left me speechless. As soon as he stepped inside, Mala ran to him and threw her arms around his neck, crying uncontrollably. "She hit me," she sobbed. "She slapped me and shouted at me just because I didn't like her food." I stood frozen, unable to believe what I was hearing. I hadn't raised a hand. I hadn't even raised my voice. But her tears were so convincing, her trembling so rehearsed, that Shah Nawaz immediately turned to me with a look I hadn't seen before: doubt. He didn't ask for my side. He didn't question her story. Instead, he gently said, "She's just a child, Faiza. You'll have to be patient with her. Don't let small things disturb the peace of the house." And just like that, my truth was buried beneath her lies. Days passed, and with every sunrise, I found myself slipping further away from the marriage I had imagined. Mala's presence wasn't just loud, it was overpowering. She shadowed me from morning to night, always in the room, always in the middle, always between Shah Nawaz and me. If I sat next to him, she would wedge herself on the other side. If I tried to speak to him privately, she would interrupt with sudden questions, fake coughs, or demands for his attention. There was no space for intimacy, no time for connection. I hadn't come into this marriage expecting fairy tales, but I had at least hoped for shared mornings, quiet evenings, small moments of laughter, something. Instead, I felt like the third person in my own relationship. I tried speaking to Shah Nawaz once, carefully choosing my words. I told him that Mala seemed too attached, too dependent, and that maybe we needed some boundaries, but he grew defensive immediately. "Faiza," he said, "I raised her alone. After our parents died, she was just a child, and I was barely an adult. I've been her brother, her guardian, her everything. If she clings to me, it's not her fault, it's the trauma." I understood trauma, I understood loneliness, but I also understood manipulation, and I had started to see it in Mala's eyes. I just didn't know how to prove it without sounding cruel. "She's not a child anymore," I said gently, "and if you don't draw a line now, she'll never let us build a life of our own." He looked away. "You don't know what she's been through. Just give her some time. She'll come around." But time only made things worse. Mala began accusing me of things I hadn't done, misplacing her books, spoiling her laundry, even breaking her phone charger. Every complaint was exaggerated and reported to Shah Nawaz like a child tattling to a teacher. Each time, he looked at me with that same tired expression. He never yelled, never fought, but his silence said it all. He didn't believe me. What hurt most was not the false accusations. It was the way he had slowly begun to withdraw. We no longer had meaningful conversations. We ate meals side by side, but never really together. The distance between us had grown so vast that even silence felt too loud. And yet, I said nothing. I washed the dishes. I folded the laundry. I waited by the door when he was late. I played the part of a wife with quiet obedience, hoping that one day he would see me, not as someone threatening his bond with his sister, but as a partner who simply wanted a space of her own. But deep down, a bitter truth was beginning to settle. This marriage was becoming a room with 3 people, and I was the only one who seemed to notice how suffocating it had become. A month had passed since the wedding, and yet nothing between Shah Nawaz and me had evolved. We still hadn't shared a real moment as husband and wife. Mala remained glued to our lives like an uninvited shadow. She occupied our bed at night and our space during the day. Any attempt I made to connect with Shahnawaz was intercepted by her interruptions, her complaints, or her crafted sorrow. But there was something else, too. Something I had begun to notice in recent days. Mala always carried a particular purse. Small, elegant, and tightly clutched, she never let it out of her sight. Whether she was in the lounge, on the balcony, or even inside the house, the purse was always by her side. I found it strange. It wasn't normal behavior for a teenager, even one as possessive as her. One day, while she was in the shower, I decided to follow my gut. I opened her cupboard quietly and found the purse tucked behind a stack of scarves. My hands trembled as I picked it up, not entirely sure what I was expecting. But when I unzipped it and looked inside, the world seemed to stop for a moment. There it was. A small bottle, unlabeled but familiar. A certain kind of medicine. The kind only meant for men. And not just any men, men who needed to suppress physical desire. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at it, frozen. That explained everything, the distance, the detachment, the unnatural coldness between Shahnawaz and me. My mind began to race. Was Mala giving this to him? Was she drugging her own brother to keep him away from me? I quickly placed the bottle back and returned the purse, my hands shaking, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it echo in my ears. When Mala came out, I tried to look normal, but I couldn't stop watching her. The way she moved, the calmness on her face, it all seemed rehearsed now. Everything suddenly felt darker, more calculated. I didn't know how to confront her, not yet. And I certainly couldn't accuse her without proof. But I knew this. Something was very, very wrong. And the home I had entered with dreams of love and companionship was hiding a secret I could no longer ignore. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of the bottle haunted me. My thoughts spiraled. How long had this been going on? Was Mala doing it before the wedding too? Was Shahnawaz ever truly distant by nature, or had she orchestrated it all? I waited until the house fell silent, then gently nudged Shahnawaz awake. He looked startled, confused. Without saying a word, I led him to the spare room, opened the cupboard, and placed the bottle in his hand. He turned it over, confused at first, then still. "This," I whispered, "was in her purse." His eyes widened, and something flickered in his expression, a mixture of disbelief and slow, terrifying realization. "Where did she even get this?" he muttered. "You tell me," I replied, my voice cracking. "All I know is that I've been sleeping beside a stranger for a month, and now I know why." Shahnawaz sat down, silent for a long moment. Then he stood abruptly and stormed into the bedroom, switching on the light. Mala blinked awake, confused. He threw the bottle at her feet. "What is this?" he demanded. "Answer me!" Mala's face went pale. Her lips trembled. I don't know what—" "Don't lie to me," he said, his voice sharper than I'd ever heard. And then she broke. Tears welled in her eyes as she sobbed. "I was scared. Scared you'd forget me. My friend said wives take brothers away. I didn't want to be alone." Her confession hung heavy in the air, cutting through the silence like a blade. I stood at the door, heart aching, not just from betrayal, but from the pain of a girl so broken, she chose poison over love to hold on to the only person she had left. The room was heavy with silence after her confession. Shahnawaz stood motionless, eyes fixed on his sister, not in anger anymore, but in disbelief. He sank to the floor, buried his face in his hands, and whispered, "What have you done, Mala?" She cried harder, trembling as she spoke. "I didn't want to lose you. You're all I have." I walked toward her slowly, the bitterness in my heart melting into something else. Understanding. This wasn't just jealousy, this was fear. A fear that had been fed by loneliness, by the loss of parents, by whispered lies from so-called friends. I knelt beside her. "Mala," I said softly, "you don't have to lose your brother to love me. I'm not here to take him away. I'm here to be your family too." She looked up, eyes red and swollen. "You mean that?" I nodded, tears in my own eyes. "But love can't survive in the dark. It needs truth. It needs space." She wiped her face and reached into her bag, taking out the remaining medicine. Without a word, she walked to the sink and poured it all out. That act, simple as it was, carried the weight of apology and release. Days passed. Slowly, the air in the house began to feel lighter. Mala started calling me by name with warmth, not contempt. One evening, she decorated our room with flowers and told me, smiling shyly, "Tonight is yours." That night, for the first time, Shanawaz held my hand without hesitation. And beside us, outside the door, a sister slept peacefully in her own room. It wasn't a perfect family, but it was finally whole. Because sometimes all broken hearts need is a little time and someone willing to stay.